Played out to Socrates. Socrates still trying to get the opening. Oh, Socrates! Whoa!
And there it is. The crazy gang have beaten the Culture Club.
Maggie Thatcher, can you hear me? Maggie Thatcher, your boys took a hell of a beating. Your boys took a hell of a beating.
Welcome to Your Boys Took One Hell of a Beating. And we've got a fantastic guest today who's come up with an absolutely brilliant book on his career in football, wide-ranging career on football, written in conjunction with Philip Dorks. And it is the wonderful Dave Worthington. Dave, from a famous footballing family, David.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I was the oldest, so the oldest of three. Dad was a professional footballer for Man United, but coming through the youth and the Manchester County Youth Football Association, he'd done that. But the war came along, and it's just spoiled his career. You know, so 6 years of war, and my dad going into the paratroopers. He went in the army and then became a paratrooper eventually. And it spoiled his career because 6 years out of a young man's life at that time, you know, he didn't do any good for his football. But he had three boys first, and then 12 years after me, he managed a girl, and I can tell you now that if women's football had been in those days what it is today, she'd have played for England. Julie was an absolutely cracking footballer. She played out with the boys all the time. Never stopped playing football. But yeah, I was the oldest and started at Halifax Town, which is where we lived in a little village called Shelf, just outside of Halifax. But 2 years later, Bob came along, and then another year and a half later, Frank came along. And of course, most people, when they hear the word Worthington, they always go back to a story about Frank. Everybody's got a story about Frank Worthington somewhere along the line. So I used to have to listen to that. I've listened to that for years and years and years. So I don't mind because he was sheer class.
Indeed he was. But yeah, another brother as well who made it to league football, and a son as well.
Bob started at Halifax Town like I did and went to Middlesbrough, and then he got transferred along with in a deal with Don Masson to Notts County. And Don Masson had a big part in Notts County doing very well, and so did Bob. He was 6'2" tall left fullback, and he knocked a few people about and stopped wingers playing, and he even scored a goal once. But I don't want to go into that one for Bob.
Fantastic. I mean, Dave, your own career, it took you through Halifax Town, as you've mentioned, Barrow, Grimsby Town, where you spent was about 7 years there. A 1971-72 promotion from the 4th Division as champions. Halifax Town again on loan. Southend United. You crossed paths with Bob at Southend United as well.
I did. I was in my first season at Southend. I went off to America for the summer to play for Denver Dynamos, and we went on. So two or three of our lads went on loan out to America that summer. Whilst I was out there, Arthur Rowley signed our Bob for Southend as well. So it was a bit strange. Bob was due their first baby at that time. They didn't know whether it was going to be a boy or a girl, which a lot of us didn't in those days. We didn't want to know whether we wanted to wait till the day of the birth. Our mum sent me a telegram to America saying, "Great news about Bob, eh?" You know, so I thought, oh, they must have got the baby now, you know, and I'm expecting that. And when I rang up, she says, "No, it's not because they got the baby. It's because he's signed for Southend United." So she was more impressed with that than getting his first child. I was at Barrow for a couple of years, you know, which that I think that was probably the making of me going to Barrow. It might sound crazy nowadays, but leaving Halifax as a 19-year-old when I'd scored, I think I got something like 14 goals in 40-odd games for Halifax Town as a 17 and an 18-year-old. But they were going part-time. They were skint again. And I didn't want part-time football at that age. So the manager who'd been coach at Halifax went to Barrow, and he asked me if I'd like to go to Barrow with him. And it was a great move for me because at 19 years of age, not long after I'd been there a few months and he'd seen what I was doing, he made me captain of a professional football club outfit in as it League Two as it is now, but in it was Division 4 in those days. But I was captain of a team full of, some good professional players that had played for Bolton Wanderers and Blackburn and Ipswich Town and things like that. So that 2 years at Barrow really changed my life. And eventually I went to Grimsby, where obviously I spent 7.5 years there, which was fantastic. I had some bad times there, but that 71-72 season that you mentioned was brilliant under Laurie McMenemy. Absolutely brilliant, A big man, a big character. I didn't get on too well with him at the start, but that's another story. If we've time for that one, I can tell you that one too.
Oh, absolutely. I do want to ask you about playing with under Laurie McMenemy, without a shadow of a doubt. And then you drift into the Cambridge City spell as player manager.
Yeah, my career finished a little bit too early. I was getting too much fan praise from the Southend people. The Southend fans were, in those days, of course, there was no WhatsApp and none of this where the fans are having a go and, they can praise the team or they can grumble about the team. It was newspapers, A lot of the people knew that I'd taken my coaching badges and I was coaching the youth team at Southend. And I was a popular player because I just gave 100% every week. They knew that. And they started writing letters to the paper, to Southend Evening Echo, to say, get the manager out, get Arthur Rowley out, because the team's not doing that well. Get him out and put David Worthington in charge. So it was a bit strange on match days because the manager's picking me. I'm his captain down there. And the crowd are chanting, Rowley out, Worthington. Rowley out, Worthington. And it got a little bit embarrassing at times. So at the end of the season, a season that we struggled really, at the end of the season, the manager decided to get rid of me, obviously to save his job, which I suppose you can't blame him in a way, but I was a bit of an embarrassment to him. And so he gave me a free transfer, and I was only 32 years of age, and I was so fit, I still had 2, 3, even 4 years left in me, But it finished my career because I didn't come back and I had to go and start a business, which was very disappointing. Very disappointing. And I've just come back from Southend, as it happens. This week we had a weekend. We've had a weekend down there, and it was great. We had a book promotion down there, my new book, and it was really nice listening to some of those stories from the Southend people, and they all said the same thing. They told Maggie's my new wife. It was not the same one as I lived with in Southend, and she was really proud to hear some of the stories about just by being an honest, hard-working, decent professional player, and and I think the fans loved that, to see someone grafting every week and fighting for their club, and it stuck with them. And I really did have some lovely stories last weekend, and we came back very happy, to be honest. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! It sounds like a great time of your life, a great part of your career. I mean, there's not what's what I'm picking up on is there's a great deal of fondness in every club you've mentioned there. You mentioned kind of like a few difficulties at Grimsby to start with, but you spent so long there as well. Of course, there's ups and downs with a football career, as there is in all walks of life. But is there any of those clubs in particular you played for that I don't know, kind of like has your fondest recollections, maybe?
Like I said about Barrow, it was a different kind of attitude from the people, But at Grimsby, perhaps because my 3 children were all born while we were in Grimsby, that helps a lot. And so many of the players I played with were good lads that I still go back and see. Even though I've been scouting and living abroad for 21 years until recently, I still came back every summer. And the first place I went to was Grimsby, and we would all meet up on the seafront in Cleethorpes at a pub there, the Kingsway, and we just recall all those times, all those years ago when, yeah, we had some bad times, but the year with McManamy, he came in and he was different class, man management skill. He won't like me saying it. I know he won't, but I don't think Laurie was a great tactician. I really don't. But he knew how to get the best out of every single player on that team. And times when Mickey Hickman and myself, who were playing in midfield a lot in those days, we were two that had run our legs off. And if we're losing 4-0 with 2 minutes to go, we'd still be fighting for a goal, or trying to get back in the game. And he loved that. But at half-time, one of these games, when we were getting hammered, he absolutely slaughtered Mickey Hickman and me in the dressing room, telling us we've got to start running again. We've got, you've got to do more than that. Come on, I want you to get into them. And we were absolutely gobsmacked because Mick and I had just run our legs off and we'd fought for every ball. And there were others that weren't doing it. But I realised then after the game, and a few days later when he told me and he said, I only gave you the rollicking because I wanted to tell the other players that if I can give us a hammering, a telling off at half time, blimey, we've got to do a little bit more. So he was picking on the other 9 rather than Mickey Hickman and me. And so little things like that Laurie did, it changed our lifestyle there. We used to go down to the docks. We used to go around the hospitals and things and meet people, and he created a team there that it was absolutely wonderful to be in, because the last game of the season when we actually pipped Southend to the Championship, we won promotion and we finished first in the league on a rearranged game. It was just wonderful feeling to be there, and in amongst that lot. And the town loved it because we went everywhere. We went on the docks to see people and meet people at 5 o'clock in the morning to see what the fishermen were doing. Big swollen hands, bringing the fish in and cutting the fish up, ready for us to come to eat, But he got us involved with the people that were paying money from their wages to pay our wages. So it really was, a special time there. I do still speak to Laurie. I'm still in touch. I'm still in touch with him. So that's a nice point. Just after all these years,
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I mean, at the time, it can't have been, as you've spoken about him and his ways there, it can't have been a surprise that he went on to, what he did go on to do with Southampton.
Yeah, it was wonderful for him. I was a bit disappointed he didn't take me with him. He did take a couple of the lads. He took Lou Chatterley, and he also took the goalkeeper, Ian Turner. And so he took 2 of the lads down. But I finished up soon after he'd gone. I was on my way. I didn't get on with the next manager, and I was on my way down to Southend then. But yeah, and I was actually at the game, given 2 tickets by Ian Turner for me and my son Gary, because we were living in Southend then, to go and watch that cup final. Which after it was only a couple of years later, but they beat Man United in the cup final into Southampton, and so yeah, and what a pleasure it was to go and see that, and see my old mates, with the FA Cup, which was a big thing, always meant a lot to me as a youngster, and it always has done. It doesn't so much now because some teams don't even put the first team out for the first few rounds, which I think it's a bit sad, really. But
it is.
That's my opinion.
No, and it's shared by a lot of us as well, I think, David. So it's shared by a lot of us, certainly, who listen to this podcast. Across your playing days, give us a few names of I don't know, some of the best players you played with and your hardest opponents.
Some of the best lads had to be at Southend. At Grimsby. Stuart Brace, played with him at Grimsby and at Southend. Bracey was lightning quick, a right winger, proper right winger, stayed out wide right, but he could sprint the length of the field faster than anyone. He could go over 10 yards quicker than anyone. He could cross balls into the box. And he finished up getting in the box and scoring goals as well. And he did the same for Southend that he did at Grimsby. People like Stuart were really terrific to play with. throw me a bit there because it's difficult picking one or two out, I might have to think about that one and come back.
Have a think about. You can have a think about that one and maybe come back to it later. After your playing career's finished, the second half of this amazing relationship with football, your scouting career, take us on a trip, between the two and into your scouting career.
It was difficult because I had a go at management. I became player manager at Cambridge City. So after my career finished at Southend, as I said earlier, a bit too early for me. I had to start a business. I had a family to keep, had a mortgage, to pay. And I started a Calagas business with my mother, my father-in-law and my brother-in-law. And we started a Calagas business in Elland near Halifax. So I was just getting involved in driving a van, delivering Calagas to farms and houses. And I was doing that and feeling really frustrated that I'd left football early. When, strangely enough, Laurie McMenemy must have been on the phone to a guy called Bill Levers, who was at Manchester City many years ago. And they've been talking, and Laurie said, if you need a manager, then Billy said, try Dave Worthington. I've got his number. He's back in the north, and I don't think he's doing anything football-wise. So they rang me up and invited me down to Cambridge City. We're in the Southern League then. And they invited me down for an interview for the job. And I just moved the kids all the way back from Southend. We moved the 3 kids back to Yorkshire, got a house sorted out. And then all of a sudden I went down for an interview. I think the board must have been impressed because of what I was saying. And they gave me the job as player manager. That was a proper managerial role, but, I played at full-back by then. And so I was playing every week and managing the club and doing the commercial side a little bit as well. So it was a difficult job. So I had to move the kids down there to Cambridge, which is a nice place, I must admit. And we moved into first a temporary house, and then we bought one of our own the second year. But unfortunately, it's a shame really because the chairman there was there was 8 players there when I arrived, and I'd to find a team, make a team up within like weeks because the season started in August and it was the end of July, and I had to scrat around for some players, but I did find a few good lads that I'd played against previously and in league teams, and we did okay over the 2 seasons. We went from bottom of the league up to 5th place in the Southern League, knocking on the door, but there was no money there, absolutely no money there, and I won't tell you the circumstance, but it was difficult when my cheque bounced a couple of times for my wage. So I decided I better get back up north and look after the family, So we did that, and it gradually over the years I worked for Halifax Town on and off, and I started a transport business later on. Me and my wife had split up by then, so I had 3 kids to look after on my own and for a spell. So there were some difficult times in there, but it toughens you up. It makes it tough. You have a few bad moments. But then I was at a game. I was working for a little bit for Boston United, doing a little bit of scouting, not much, just assessing players and what have you. And I was at a game at Wrexham when I'm walking away back to the car park with the chief scout of Bolton Wanderers, who was a guy called Jack Chapman. And Jack had brought in a lot of good players, older players coming from big clubs, your Joe Kayefen and, all these boys, and Ivan Campo they had on loan. And Sam had made he got the best out of those players to get them into the Premier League and stay in the Premier League, so for a few seasons. And this day, coming away from Wrexham game, Jack said, "Are you still working for Halifax?" I said, "No, they've gone bust again, so there's no money." And he said, "Well, you want to do a bit of scouting for us, or do you want to come over and have a chat about scouting for us?" And they had a behind closed doors match. Ivan Campo had played, I think, 7 or 8 games on loan, and they just signed him. So they'd made that signature from Real Madrid. So he's played for Real Madrid. He's 32 years of age, wonderful footballer. technique, superb, passing ability, brilliant. And Jack says, come and watch the game, because we're trying to bed Campo into the centre-half position, where he's going to play in the Premier League. So I went over on the Monday to this game, and they're only playing a reserve team, but I wrote down a few notes, as I always did him. And some of the other scouts laugh at me because I've got notebooks full of, small writing and, and remarks about good players and bad players. So Campo is already signed. He's already going to be there. He's playing centre half. And in this game, a couple of times he did little tricks on the edge of his own box or inside his own box and dribbling round a striker and knocking the ball out, pinging it to the left or pinging it to the right and up front or through midfield. Absolutely wonderful at that. But I thought, if he takes risks like that in the Premier League, somebody's going to catch him out. So I wrote it down. I said I would not play this player in this position. I would play him as a defensive midfield player. So he's got a back four behind him, where he's got 4 defenders behind him that can maybe make up for him if he makes a mistake in there and let him do his skillful things further up the field. Because I'd written that down, Jack said to me, can I just read what you put? And so I said, yeah, fine, no, have a look. He said, let me go and have a chat with Sam. So he goes across the stadium, he has a chat with Sam, and about half an hour later comes back and he says, when can you start work for us? And I went, what? He said, when can you start work for Bolton Wanderers? And I'm thinking, sacked at Halifax Town. Well, not sacked because they just ran out of money. But I said, no job. Come to Bolton and they're going to take me on just like that. And Jack said, yeah, when can you start? He says, Sam said, you're honest in your opinion about this player that we have just signed and think is wonderful, and you're giving him a bit of a slating. so he says, Sam likes your honesty, so you can start. He says, and I said, well, I'm only doing a bit of painting for a building, a construction guy. I said, I'm doing a bit of painting for them. I can start anytime. He said, well, on your way home to Halifax tonight, he said, will you call at Bury and watch this reserve game, see if there's anybody there for us? So it started as daft as that. And I had five years or so, wonderful times at Bolton, and living abroad. I went abroad to live after another divorce. So I went abroad to live just to get my head together. And that helped Bolton again start and looking at all the French players, because I bought a little cottage in France, and we brought quite a number of French players and French African players to Bolton. So it was a really successful career. I went from assessing teams for them to actually being chief scout in the end, because Jack Chapman was getting older, and I took Jack's role as chief scout eventually.
Magnificent. Wonderful. I mean, that was a great era for Bolton as well. Sam Allardyce, I think of all the, he takes a lot of stick, from but that Bolton side played some absolutely wonderful football.
Yeah, and there's some really quality players, weren't there? With Joe Keff and Jufy and them and Kevin Davis, and then eventually I brought Anelka. It was a good time, a really good time for Bolton. But with me going away to France and getting information, instead of a scout flying over at a weekend and watching one game a week for them or something, I was there doing 3 games, sometimes 4 games a week, and bringing loads of information, local information to them from France. And it worked really well in the end, because with so many French players that came over and played for us, and it was enriching our team, and because we had some real quality in those days. And Sam, the people that think Sam's a dinosaur, they have no idea at all. Sam was one of the very first to bring in a stats man and a data man.
Yeah, all the sports science.
Yeah, he did all that. He brought Fordy in, Mike Ford, to do that side of it, and the psychology. He brought Dave Fallows, who, well, I think you're a Liverpool supporter, are you? Well, Dave Fallows has worked he doesn't work for them now, but he just left them recently. But Dave worked for Bolton before he went to Liverpool and brought all that data and stats, to Liverpool. But the main thing was about the stats and things. Sam got all that and he used all that, but he always wanted someone with experience that had played the game, that had played at a reasonable level. And like he always had to see the player for himself at the end. So even if when I was chief scout, if I've got all the stats there saying what a good player is, I've been out and seen the player 3 or 4 times and watched him and said, Gaffer, he's spot on for us for the Premier League. Then he would always make himself available to go and watch him for himself, even if it was only once. But he's relying on Jack Chapman for many years, and then relying on me, my opinions, to actually say this player is for us for the Premier League. So it was a really good time. But the stats and the psychology, Sam brought it in all those years before any of these people that are talking nowadays. Because I think some of the stats are not worth the paper they're written on, but some are. So take the ones that you think's right, and use people like myself to sort of verify what a player might be thinking on the pitch at the time, or what his attitude might be like. Stats don't tell you his attitude.
No, they don't.
A lot of players fail, especially in the Premier League at that level. A lot of players fail because of the wrong attitude or the lack of attitude.
I mean, this was at Bolton. It's the first of, is it 5 or 6 Premier League clubs that you worked for over the stretch of your scouting career?
Yeah. It was strange, really, because Sammy Lee took over. He took over from Sam when Sam decided to go to Newcastle. He thought he'd taken Bolton as far as he could, and there wasn't enough, I think, finance available from the club to take it any further, and it was a bit disappointing. But when Mike Ashley gave him an offer to go to Newcastle, he took that and he went there, and he always said to me, you come with me when you want, or you can stay with Sammy. But Sammy wanted to bring his own person in. I was Sam Allardyce's man as chief scout at that time. Sammy wanted to bring his own in, and Sammy and I got on well. Don't get me wrong, we're absolutely fine. But it happens, and he wanted to bring his own number 2 in, on the scouting side, and he brought his own man in, and so I was without a job, but not for long, because during that season, Sam and I had gone out to Amsterdam. Great walking through Manchester Airport with him on that Sunday morning, because everybody's wanting to stop and talk to Sam Allardyce, not Dave Worthington, but Sam Allardyce, and everybody's talking to him. But we went to watch a game at Ajax, and when we got up in the stand, he actually introduced me to this guy who was Frank Arneson, who was at Tottenham first. He was at Tottenham as football director at Tottenham, and then I think Chelsea headhunted him and took him to Chelsea. And Sam introduced me to Frank Arneson way up in the stands at Ajax this day. So in the summer, when I lost my job with Sammy Lee, I got a phone call, and Sam was saying, I can go to Newcastle with him if I want. And I got a phone call from Frank Arneson, and he said, Dave, I've heard you might be leaving Bolton. Would you like to come down to Chelsea? And I went, whoa, Abramovich, Chelsea, wow, this might be big stuff, this. And so I rang Sam out of respect for him, and I just said to him, Gaffer, I've had a call from Frank Arneson. I said, you introduced me to the man. I said, Frank wants me to go to Chelsea and be a European scout for him. He said, well, Dave, he says, go down for the interview, listen to what he has to say, tell me how much money he's offering you, and I'll see if I can match it at Newcastle, So I went down there, went down to Chelsea, watched team training, saw the setup at Cobham, and it was absolutely wonderful. Saw some of the players there, top players in the Premier League at the time, and he offered me the job on the Saturday morning. And so on the Saturday, as I'm driving back, he offered me a figure that was way, way more than I've been getting as chief scout at Bolton, where I had like 12 or 13 scouts underneath me I was in charge of. They offered me just to be European scout, so I wouldn't have all the work to do. I'd just have my own work to do. And Frank offered me this deal. And I thought, I've got to ring Sam. I've got to ring Sam. I've got to tell him this figure. and I rang Sam. I got into services coming out of London. And I rang Sam and he says, go on then, tell me how much. And I told him the figure and he just went, oh, yeah, I'll never forget that over the phone. It was absolutely brilliant. His response was brilliant. He does use that word quite a bit, but it was lovely, And he says, "You've got to do it for your family, Dave. You've got to do it for your mortgage. Just take the money and see how it goes there, And so that was a great boost, that. But I really get annoyed with people that think how bad Sammy is. Whatever he's done is done. It was a mistake. It was nothing much. But I have a lot of respect for him, and we still speak to each other every few weeks now. So yeah. But it was nice going to. It was very nice going to Chelsea, I must admit.
Nicholas Anelka pops up a couple of times in your story as well, both at Bolton and Chelsea.
Yeah, he does. I mean, at Bolton, Nick, I actually took him. Sam didn't know anything about Anelka except what he'd seen in the past as a player, and a lot of people thought he was moody and miserable and all this, and caused a few problems. But in actual fact, Nick was he sort of matured, and he got someone else as an agent. He'd gone out to Turkey. He'd gone to Fenerbahce to play, maybe because they were a top club in their league, but it's not like playing in the Premier League. He'd been at big clubs, Man City and Arsenal, hadn't he? Liverpool.
Yeah, we loved him at Liverpool. We were largely distraught that Houllier didn't sign him on a full-time basis. He was the class of the fella, and he enjoyed being a Liverpool player as well. And he was very much one of those that came but got away as well.
Yeah, well, he'd gone to Fenerbahce, and I got a call from a young lad that grew up with Nick in Paris, and he was a football agent in France, and he'd told me, he said, Dave, I've got some news. If you want to try and sign Nicholas Anelka, he said he's in Fenerbahce. He's not happy. He's changed his life completely. He's got a new agent. He's got a different agent now. He's not getting pushed around by his family as much. And he's met a lovely lady, Barbara. He's met a lovely lady. She's a dancer and a choreographer. And he says he's settled down and he wants to come back to the Premier League. And I said, but Bolton, you think he'll come to Bolton Wanderers, He says, well, we'll try him, So anyway, after lots of humming and ahhing, I said to Sam, we can get Anelka, He said, no chance, He said, I'm not sure whether I want him anyway. I said, well, he's class and he scores goals. So he said, yeah, but he says, all my mates, I said, I've been telling people about him, and every story is a bad story about him. I said, yes, that's the past. I said, he's changed. I'm telling you from one of his best friends, he has changed completely. So Sam said, I'm not sure, but he said, look, Worthy, get out to Fenerbahce, go and watch him a couple of times. Tell me what his attitude is like. Tell me if he's going to work for Bolton Wanderers, if he's going to do the work off the ball, and is his attitude right? Is he fit? Is he dawdling about, or is he fit? He said, go and do a proper assessment. So I went a couple of times to Fenerbahce, quietly, just went out there on my own, disappeared into the crowd, watched him, and then we made arrangements then, because I said, look, Gaffer, he's fine. He looks fine. The background story is correct about him. He's found a new lady. He's quite happy now, and he's a different person. He's not the same agent. So we arranged a meeting in the summer, and Sam and I went out to Charles de Gaulle Airport, and we made arrangements for a room at the top of the hotel to, and our strange because we had our analysts and the IT boys put together lots of pieces about Bolton Wanderers on video, so we could show Nick all these things and nice places to live, around Bolton. Not sure about that one, but but no, there are some nice places.
There are. I'm not a million miles away from the place actually. There are some nice places out in the hills. Yeah,
there are definitely, without a doubt. But we showed him Cheshire and everything. I mean, he should have known this from previous, but from living there previously, playing for Man City. We talked to him and it's probably an hour. Nick just sat across the table from Sam, looking at him and listening to him, and his eyes were just focused on Sam all the time. He didn't seem to look around the room at all. He didn't seem to look at me, And so Sam was a bit worried about what his attitude might be, and whether he would sign for Bolton. But it gave him everything, told him everything. And then the next day, we both left in different planes, going to different places. And we just thought, well, maybe he'll sign, maybe he won't. And then a few days later, I remember Sam picking the phone up to me and saying, were they? We've got him. And, what a success. I was so chuffed because I was in right at the start of that one and nobody needed to. I found out all that information beforehand. So, you have to go into the character and everything. And being fair to Nick, he scored 21 goals for us that season. We'd done really well. He was brilliant for us. He wasn't the same person that he'd been 4 or 5 years ago, because at the end of that season, he got married to Barbara, and he invited, this is unbelievable, but he invited all the staff at Bolton Wanderers, everybody, office staff, coaching staff, everybody. And he said, after they got married in Paris, and he says, I want all you lot, everybody at Bolton, you've been so good to me, I want all you lot to come to Marrakesh and have 3 days in a 5-star hotel in the middle of Marrakesh and putting on shows for us and everything, and I'll pay for everything. And he did that. Anybody that wanted to go. That was a wonderful, wonderful gesture. Maggie and I added a day on either side, so we had 5 days in Marrakesh. But yeah, it was a wonderful thing. And people, many people, when I tell that story, people say to me, but he's got all that money, he can do it. I said, yeah, but he didn't need to do that. He wasn't obliged to do that. He just did it, because he'd been so happy the way Bolton had treated him from start to the end of the season. And so it was terrific gesture on his part. And yeah, we all had a good time out there. I can tell you that. We had a great time in Marrakesh. Yeah.
Brilliant stuff.
I actually took him to Chelsea as well, but I don't know whether you want to go into that.
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah, please do. Please go. Yeah, go into the Chelsea, the Chelsea part of it.
Yeah, because it's strange, isn't it, that, like I told you the story earlier, but I went to Chelsea, and every month we had to put a sheet in with the players that we would sign. So this is down at Chelsea. So we write every month. I put in the name Nicholas Anelka, and the people up above me in the scouting department were no. I said, but he's been brilliant. He's been brilliant, and he's still doing well, at Bolton. And I said, we must sign him. And every single month, Anelka was. I had 2 or 3 other names there, but Anelka was top. He was top of my 3 or 4 lists of strikers we should sign. Nothing happened. I was getting a bit despondent when all of a sudden, when I was out, I was away in Spain, living out in Spain, and I found out that he'd signed for us. So that was absolutely brilliant. I chuffed again for him then, So.
Yeah, as a career goes, it's there's something massively interested in how a player can fluctuate like that, and to have the world at his feet as a teenager, and seemingly throw it away, but then the redemption comes. And yeah, for me, I had nothing other than admiration for Nicholas Anelka. The 4 or 5 months he spent at Liverpool on loan, the 2001-02 season. He was magnificent. I remember one particular performance against Newcastle. I think we won 3-0. He didn't score that night, but he was key to absolutely everything. You know, the way he could take, you know, at times he could take 2, 3, even 4 players away, opposition players away, to create just the most, you know, inviting amounts of space for his teammates, and the intelligence of football was what was very telling about him.
Yeah, he was a cracking player, and the thing I liked about him at Bolton, he was there with we had Jufy, Alegi Juve, Kevin Davis, and Anelka play our front three, because we played 4-3-3. The way that they interchanged positions all the time, because people say he'd be no good as a long ball man. Well, no, he's not. He's not gonna play up the middle and head a ball, but he'll play down the middle for a short while, and then he'll disappear onto the left wing, and then he'll turn up on the right wing. And all three of them, Jufy, Davis, and because I think Kevin Davis came from Chesterfield as a right winger. So he could play on the right or down the middle. And okay, Kevin didn't have the technical ability of an Elk and that, but what a front three they were for us, and I think that's why we did so well and got into Europe. We actually Bolton Wanderers playing in Europe. It sounds a bit crazy, but it happened in those days. I was really proud to be part of it, especially when I was living in France as well, because I remember going down and seeing them play in Marseille and get cheated out of a goal. I still say the Marseille first goal was offside, but I was only sitting in the stand. The linesman was in line with it, but I said it was offside.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Moving along from Chelsea, there's Hull City with Phil Brown, of course, and that was a great era for Hull City, of that rise. Yeah, there was a boom and bust element to it, but there was a hell of a crest of a wave at Hull City as well. Blackburn Rovers, and a litany of clubs you've been involved in, David.
Hull was a bit of a shock, really, because I went to Hull because Brownie had done quite well with them, and he'd taken one of the scouts that I had at Bolton, Bob Shaw. He'd taken him in as his chief scout while I was at Chelsea. But the global financial crash left Abramovich losing a lot of money somewhere along the line, and he actually sacked. I got a message midweek, while I was happily working for Chelsea, and I got a message saying, "I'm sorry, but the owners told us we've got to cut the scouting staff." I'd only been there maybe a year, so I was one of the newest in there, and they had to cut it by a third, and because they had about 36 scouts all over the world at that time in Chelsea, and they definitely cut 12 of us out then. So I had to leave there, and it was a bit awkward. I didn't know what the heck to do because it was partway through the season. But fortunately, Brownie and Bob Shaw, his chief scout, Bob rang me up and said, we need another experienced scout, Worthy, if you want to come and work for Hull. So I had a few months. It wasn't too long, but I had a few months there working for Hull City, And I was there, funnily enough, at the match at Man City when Brownie brought the players out after half time, if you remember, and sat them down in front of the away supporters and gave them a real rollicking. And it didn't work for him. He got a lot of stick for that, Brownie. I could see why he was doing it. That he was doing it because these people, they're paying your wages. To a degree, they're paying your wages, and they come and see some fight and fire. And so he didn't. Rather than do it in the dressing room, if I do it in front of the fans, I could understand the psychology. But it turned on him that a lot of the players didn't like it, and of course the team struggled quite a bit after that. I still see Brownie now and again. I've seen him. Unfortunately, I see each other at funerals nowadays. But so I live in Ripondon, where he actually used to live when he actually signed for Halifax Town as a player all those years ago.
Before we started recording, you did drop an interesting teaser of a a sense of mistaken identity in Madrid.
Oh yeah. That's right. Yeah. Well, you said you said there must be another Dave Worthington out there. I got one or two stories like this, but I was in Madrid. I was living. I think I was living. I was living in southern Spain at the time, but I was in Madrid for a game. I'd booked in at a hotel, had my meal, gone to sleep, and at 5 o'clock in the morning, there's a bang, bang, bang hammering on my door. And I thought, what the heck's going on here? You know, bam, 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 bam. And it's still, again, I used to sleep in the nude. So I slotted some underpants on, slotted my underpants on, opened the door, and there's two massive Spanish policemen at the door. And I'm thinking, what the heck? I've done nothing wrong. I knew I had, you know. And they were saying, passport. I want your passport. And what the heck's this about? So I found my passport, handed it to one of them. He went downstairs while the other stayed in the room with me to make sure I didn't go out anywhere. I wasn't going to go out in my underpants anyway. But and he took my passport downstairs. Now apparently, when it all came about, they were looking for a David Worthington who was American, and his birthday was the same as mine.
Oh my word!
So I'm English, he's American, and only by giving the passport and taking it downstairs, and he must have had to ring control or whatever, that they discovered that there was a difference. I'm English and he's American. It's the wrong David Worthington they've knocked up at 5 o'clock in the morning. So, but I'm not kidding. It was a scary, scary thing when you just wake up all of a sudden and walk out the door and there's two. Because in Spain, I think I look back and I think most Spanish policemen are at least 6'2" tall. So, and they're built like this with shoulders like that. So, and they have a gun.
No nonsense either. No exactly. Nonsense from the Spanish police.
Exactly.
Absolutely zero nonsense.
Yeah, which I like. I like. I can put up with that.
Yeah. Absolutely. When you're on the right side of law, it's not a bad thing at all.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
brilliant. I mean, David, such a wonderful career, and the book's brilliant, by the way. Absolutely love the book.
Oh, great. But I must admit, Steve, that when I started it, when we started, I was really unsure because I thought, well, why would anybody want to write a book about a third and fourth division player, League One, League Two player in England, a little lad from Halifax and all that. And when Phil came along and started talking to me, it was wonderful because he is a football supporter. Well, not really. He's a Leeds United supporter, but but he's born and bred in Leeds. When he started hearing my tales, he was loving it, and he was recording everything, and he would take 4 and 5 hours of recording and take it away. And as he sent each chapter back, I felt that this is far better than I ever thought it would be because the way he's written it, and I really appreciate him for this. Whether we make £5 or whether we make 5,000 quid, I have no idea, and I'm not bothered. But it's his first book. He left his job with the BBC as a football journalist with the BBC. He left his job to help his wife with her business, a candle business, and we've become good friends. But the way he's written it and bounced it backwards and forwards, the different chapters, the way he leads into chapters, the way he leaves a chapter, making you want to think about, I want to read the next chapter. Just the way he's written it all has been wonderful, and I really appreciate him for it. And I'm sure we'll be good mates for the rest of our lives. His brother Chris is a sports presenter for Calendar Television, Yorkshire Television, and it was through Chris that we met. Just Chris and my nephew Josh, which is one of our Bob's sons. Chris and Josh and myself were just down the local pub, the Bridge in Ripon, having a pint or two, and that's how I was telling stories, and that's how it came about, with Chris saying his brother wanted to write a book, and 2.5 years later, and we've got it all published, and I'm quite proud of it. But I'm really proud of the way I love the way that Phil has actually written it. It's different. It's a different kind of story for an ex-footballer. It's different.
Yeah, it is wonderfully written, and it goes along so well with the content, the stories, and it makes for a wonderful read. Worthy, the scouting adventures and football life of Dave Worthington, with Philip Dorks, and Sam Allardyce has done the forward for you as well, Dave.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he wrote a nice. I was very pleased when he put that in about me, and it is nice, because I like to tell people a bit more about Sam, and he's just not the person that they think, and as a kid, he's dyslexic, so it's difficult for him to write things, So it was a real pleasure when I saw what he'd put about me. I felt quite chuffed. We've had a few rows and bits of things in our time, but that was his job to tell me off if I was doing something wrong. But he listened to me on some signings, as it says in the book. He listened to me on some, and I said I would lose my job for this one particular player, and he signed him, and he was absolutely brilliant. And Abdullah Faye, that's a nice story, and that's somewhere hidden in the book, I think. Yeah.
It is a good one.
Top player, Abdullah Faye, top man.
Wonderful. Oh, Dave, it's been a joy to speak to you about this brilliant book and your wonderful career. So many layers to it.
I appreciate you asking me to do this podcast. So yeah, I wish you all the success as well for your future ones. Well done.
Thank you so much for listening. Do join us again. Thank you and goodbye.